eggnog, big cup, and hello. Just kidding. Eggnog is disgusting, but in a really great way.
Mm-hmm.
This is Candy Cane Coffee, as is tradition. Welcome to the first special episode of the Gilmore Way podcast. This week we're taking something of a mid-season break from analyzing specific episodes in sequence, and instead we're going to have like a more relaxed conversation about all the Christmas episodes of the show.
Yeah. Before we dive into the holiday festivities, though, please remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, turn on the notification bell for updates on our content, and follow us on social media. Links to all of our accounts can be found in the description below. It's really quick, it's easy to do, and we appreciate all of the support. This is also your friendly reminder that our podcast may contain spoilers. And when I say may, I mean that it will contain spoilers. But if that's something that concerns you, the solution is a very simple one. Just watch the show, get caught up, all 7 seasons and the revival, and that'll do what it needs you to do. But that being said, let's just dive into the holiday spirit.
Yeah. So it kind of shocks me a little bit how few Christmas episodes there are for this being a 7-season show. There's really only like 3 major ones, and then a few that have sort of like tangential mentions of Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely more Thanksgiving episodes, and we will be diving into Thanksgiving separately next November, because that really deserves a more fulsome exploration, because those are some great episodes. But it's funny how few Christmas episodes there are, because a lot of other shows kind of lean on Christmas more than other holidays. But Amy and Dan are Jewish, so it doesn't really surprise me that they didn't focus on it so much. But just based on, the characters and where they're located and all of that, they kind of have to touch on Christmas a little bit, but it's really not like a main focus of the show.
No, I mean, they could have done some Hanukkah episodes had they wanted to, but I think again, they knew that their characters were based out of Central Connecticut. It was a very waspy environment. Again, just knowing the background of Emily and Richard and Lorelai growing up in that household. So it tracked that she would have probably been recognizing more Protestant and or Catholic holidays and therefore celebrating Christmas. But we do get quite a few of them, not as many as I would have liked, because the holiday season always just brings joy and festivity. So it would have been nice to see a little bit more, but I do appreciate what we got from them. And I'm grateful for the opportunity that we're going to have this evening to break those down and just talk about them a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, Paris is Jewish, so we could have had some focus on her, but we know that she's also not really tight with her family, and so to focus on her in that way would have felt out of place, and it wouldn't really have worked. I mean, she does touch on it in season 3, which we'll get to. We're going to go kind of like chronologically through these. I would have loved to see some Hanukkah episodes. I'm a big fan of that, but I'll take what I can get for Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, 8 days of presents. I'll take 8 days of gifts.
And yet she calls the person who came up with that a skinflint. So I don't know. 8 days sounds good to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you want to get started, though, with talking about the first instance of Christmas that we see within the show in season 1?
Yeah. Forgiveness and stuff. What a juicy episode. And like, it's very obviously Christmas. It starts out with them preparing for the nativity, which is like one of the few overt presentations of religion or Christianity in the show. Like everything else is sort of like Christmas spirit, more traditional or just sort of wintry, as opposed to religious. And so the nativity is one of those religious moments. But it's so funny. Like, that's such a great scene. It's so tense with Lorelai and Rory still being in a fight from the end of Rory's dance. But I love, Miss Patty going around and being like, her before Mary is going into labor, is anyone else in town knocked up?
Pregnant? Yeah. And then Taylor just freaking out over like the baby doesn't, like the nativity baby that we need to be baby Jesus, just like, first off, is seemingly designated female and also is just missing an arm. So what are we going to do? And he just instructs Rory to like, just go find the missing limb, find the arm. That's your job here. And she's like, I just can't do it. So the town is, well, not the town, but like that particular festivity is like seemingly imploding right off the bat. And I just love like the holiday chaos that we kind of see being brought on screen right into question, because I just feel like that's so telling and true to what the holidays bring to a lot of people. Like, it's a wonderful time of year, but it can also be just very chaotic and stressful. And I love that we're seeing that playing out while Rory and Lorelai are also going through their own personal strife and struggles.
Yeah. Not only is it true to the season, but it's also true to Stars Hollow. Like, Stars Hollow is just, I mean, look at the Firelight Festival. Every single year, someone forgets to bring a match for that.
Every year.
Every damn year.
Yeah.
So it tracks that this is a giant mess. And then I also love that we have our first instance of Kirk as Jesus. Not the last, the first.
Kirk is a man of many talents. He'll pretty much fill, we've seen it. He'll fill whatever role Stars Hollow needs him to fill, but yeah, just Lorelai dressing him up in the outfit and just trying to like safety pin him together. Again, in the meantime, everything else is just going wrong, and Taylor is just being Taylor and having a freak out. It really embodies, I think, the holiday season. So good writing, just good comedy, and just a wonderful episode starting out with seeing how all of that is unfolding, again, in the midst of what our characters have going on.
Yeah. And so that's our sort of cold open. And then we go into the scene of Rory and Lane in the gazebo talking about her fight with Lorelai and, the fact that Dean is now called Narcolepsy Boy and that everything's still really tense. And I love how they sort of have that little conversation about presents, and she tells Lane that she got Dean Kafka's Metamorphosis. And then Lane's like, I know I've always dreamed that someday a guy would get me a really confusing Czechoslovakian novel.
Yeah, I just like, that's such a good friend moment too, though, where Lane is just looking out and she's just realizing, like, I understand why you think that that's a good gift for your boyfriend, but that's not necessary. And I'm sure that Dean will appreciate it and he'll receive it in just like a mature and appropriate manner. Well, he'll just be like, thank you. But it's a Czechoslovakian football where
it's
a Czechoslovakian football where he's just going to appreciate it. But that's not really what your boyfriend wants. And you're giving him a gift that is what you think is a good gift and what you would appreciate, but that's not what your boyfriend would appreciate. So I think Lane is really just looking out there as like a good wing woman and just saying, like, be a little more considerate of your boyfriend's interests here and maybe get something for him that is more in line with what he is actually going to enjoy and appreciate. And Rory's like, oh yeah, I didn't really consider that. So
classic Rory.
Yeah, just minutely self-centered.
Just a little bit. Yeah, I love the way that Lane puts it too. She's like, you have to look at what a gift says to the other person, not to you. And then she tells the story about buying her mom perfume. It's like, to my mother, that said, hey mom, here's some smelly sex juice. What a line.
Which Mrs. Kim would totally, yeah. She would just be like, you're going to like Bible camp every summer for the rest of your life and you're never coming home.
Yeah. True. Then we have, we switch to the inn, and we have that beautiful Christmas tree being decorated under Michelle's direction. And he's like yelling at the guy to swap the elf and the fairy. And the guy doesn't know the difference between them. And Michelle just won't help him. Like, how has Michelle not been fired? Do we know?
Plot armor?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I mean, that's my most basic of answers. But he is a good concierge for the inn, and he is a good hospitality employee to an extent. Doesn't do well with children. He tries, but
sometimes.
Sometimes, but he still has the know-how to know how to do his job well. So, I mean, Lorelai could fire him, and then who are you going to bring in? Someone who's just even more atrocious. So I think it's just a combination of both. Short answer.
It's funny because he's actually like pretty bad sometimes, where he like literally won't answer the phone. It's like, people are particularly stupid today. I cannot talk to any more of them. Second time I referenced that quote on this podcast.
Well, it'll get referenced a lot because holy hell if that's not relatable sometimes.
Yeah, beautiful decorations at the inn. And then we cut to Lorelai, and she gets that call from Emily where, Emily's asking about the party, like, cocktails are at 6 and dinner's at 8. And Lorelai says that she can't cut the cocktails. And then they just sort of like have this moment where Emily's like, well, no, I'm not too happy with you, and you're not too happy with me. So like, don't even come.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
You're uninviting me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm uninviting you. Um, I think it was a little too ungratuitous on Emily's part. I like Lorelai gave a valid explanation. She does have to work. It is the holiday season. She probably is very busy at the inn with bookings and having to manage all of that. And she didn't outrightly say, like, no, mom, I don't want to come. I just won't be there at the time that you want me to be there. And Emily's instantly just then like, well, then maybe you should just not come at all. But Rory can still come. And it's this just kind of chasm that they've always had within this mother-daughter relationship. But for Emily to immediately just be like, well, then don't even show up. Don't bother. Your daughter's still making an effort. Don't dismiss her in that way. I think Emily's in the wrong here to uninvite her. And you want to spend the holiday season with your daughter and your granddaughter who are you're just now this year trying to get reacquainted with. Don't do that. Don't be so dismissive and axe her out of a really important holiday event that has a lot of significance and that can do a lot for familial bonding.
Yeah. It's funny. I've never even really thought about it that way, where Emily seems very uncaring about what Lorelai has going on in her life. Because, she never had a standard job. And so she probably doesn't realize exactly how busy Lorelai is. She probably just looks at it as another excuse, which frankly it probably was. I mean,
Yeah.
granted, yes, things are probably busier at the inn than usual, but it hasn't really seemed to prevent Lorelai from getting to things on time before necessarily. Um, so it could just be a front because she wants to spend as little time with her mom as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely skipping ahead a little bit in season 6 when there's that rift between Rory and the grandparents. Um, Lorelai explains that the first Christmas after she left Hartford, her mom sent her an invitation to the Christmas party and she didn't go. And, she wonders like how their relationship might be different if she had accepted that invitation instead. And so she tries to encourage Rory to mend that bridge before the chasm happens to her too. So it's, yeah, Emily could have been more understanding and tried to accommodate Lorelai a little better there. Because if she wants to stay in the girls' lives, she needs to recognize that she needs to give a little, and she isn't used to doing that. And she doesn't realize that that's part of the reason that Lorelai pulls away so much.
Mm-hmm. What do you think of Emily and Richard's party in general? The one that we see them organizing and having in this episode in season 1. It's not a really big event. Like I think and I compare it and I contrast it to Rory's birthday party that Emily and Richard organized for her, and how that was seemingly something that 50 and or 100 people showed up to. This Christmas party is a lot more low key. But what did you think of the party in general in terms of what Emily and Richard were trying to achieve? Do you think it was a genuine holiday felt party, or do you think it was just another social event? How did you perceive it?
That's a good question because it is really small. I think if it were to be a true social event, they might have invited more people, but it's really hard to have a nice, intimate dinner party with that many people. And so I think what they kind of do is they rotate through Richard's business contacts every so often. And
Mm-hmm.
I think they mentioned that the Huntsbergers come one year. It's either Thanksgiving or Christmas that, you know, they're like, oh, Lorelai, you know Mitchum. Like, you met him at the Christmas party. And she's like, I don't remember that. So it's clear that every so often they'll switch it up. Although they did seem to say that, like, oh, you remember Holland Prescott? You met her last year,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So it's hard to say, but it's such a bizarre thing. Like, the guy clearly works with Richard, and so they have that level of relationship. But Christmas is such a family holiday typically,
Mm-hmm.
and so it feels a little weird for them to have this like fancy dinner party 2 weeks before Christmas with one random couple who don't even seem to be close personal friends. So I don't know, it's bizarre. And Luke even kind of calls it out as like fake Christmas. Like, why would anyone celebrate 2 weeks early?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a particular take on that? Because I never really thought about it being kind of a bizarre party.
I do. I think it was just a very It wasn't even a Christmas party. I think it was just, you can't even call it that. I think it was just another one of Emily's social engagements where she uses, like, oh, it's Christmas and the holidays as a crutch and an excuse to invite people over that they might not associate with otherwise because they don't want to or they don't need to. But that time of year is just like, oh, let's have people over for dinner that we don't necessarily want to be around, but we have to engage with once a year because that's a societal sort of expectation, especially within Emily and Richard's world. So I didn't see it as a Christmas party or a holiday party. I just saw it as something that Emily was once again planning in the same way that she planned Rory's birthday party, which was not, she cares about Rory, and that birthday party was, you know, meant to be like a put on a show for my granddaughter, but that's what it was. It was a put on a show where people were coming up giving Rory just checks and handing her birthday money, and it's like she doesn't even know these people. So that's just what Emily does. So again, I don't see this as like, you're not acknowledging Christmas, you're not acknowledging the holiday or the season or what it means. You're just entertaining people that you feel like you have to entertain, and in the meantime your granddaughter and or your daughter might be there.
That's a good point. It's like an obligation holiday. And it's so curated and like perfect because I noticed when she's on the phone with Lorelai, it's the maid who's decorating the tree. Like it almost seems like Emily takes no genuine joy in the spirit of the season and in putting up the decorations. It's just like, oh, it's December. It's time to put up the tree again. You know,
Yep.
hey maid, go put up the tree and decorate it. Where I'm like, don't you touch my tree. Like I'm decorating that. Right. So she doesn't even seem to enjoy the process of it. So it's just something, again, to pass off to her staff as an obligation that she has to fulfill every year. But something about the party itself that's interesting to me is that Richard is going off about a coworker named Henry, and his guest, Alan, says, you know, careful, Richard, this guy might be our boss someday. And so it made me have a theory that Henry is either a precursor to Jason or is Jason's older brother. Because
that's a good one.
The description of him being sort of like younger, gallivanting around London, being perhaps in bed with a cheap tramp, you know, kind of reminds me of Jason's joke about Atlantic City and, you know, nothing bonds people like waking up in bed with a hooker. I don't even know if you can say that word on YouTube, but
we did now.
Quote. Okay. So yeah, not the terminology I would use, but it's a direct quote. So
I mean, do you think that it's Jason?
I kind of like the idea that it's his older brother, because we do know that he has at least one sibling because of Floyd bragging about like his grandson starting for the Bulldogs in 2021. So I like the idea that it's a member of the Styles family that's not Jason.
I mean, that would track for me. You know, they were a bit, I don't know, not promiscuous, but maybe just a little more socially, they were inclined to be more social. And I think that just stems from their career path too, where they have to be, because that's how you're going to build your clientele and make money. So I could absolutely see Jason, his brother, having to make trips to AC and engage and, you know, host people in that way. I've never really thought about that, but that's an interesting thing that I'm going to have to want to go back and watch now, because if it was Jason and we don't get him until like a little bit later on in the show, it's an interesting way to just allude to him early on, or allude to like a member of the Styles family early on.
I mean, I don't even know if Amy and Dan had nailed down, you know, who Richard's boss was. I don't think he's mentioned by name in season 1. I think it's in season 2 at Bracebridge dinner, which we'll get to in a minute, where he says, you know, I walked right up to Floyd and said these things. So I don't know if they didn't really have a read on that character until at least season 2, and they were just sort of vague allusions to a boss. But I like the idea that, even if it's a retcon, I like the idea that Henry is Jason's older brother.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's an interesting little I don't know, not a crackpot theory, but just a little fun one to explore.
Okay, so the next thing we really get is sort of like Lorelai home alone, missing the apple tarts, which is really sad to me that like those sound delicious and I want them. But so she's at home and she calls the pizza place and their delivery van is broken and so she can't even get pizza. And then she does the most un-Lorelai thing, well, sort of a combination of the most Lorelai thing ever and the most un-Lorelai thing ever, where she opens a bag of romaine lettuce and dumps Caesar or ranch dressing directly into the bag and just shakes it up and eats it. I'm like, since when do you eat vegetables? But also eating them straight out of the bag does track for her in my mind.
It's
But then
the
we have,
lettuce. It left its essence.
yeah, and the essence is enough, to give you your vegetable quota for the week.
For the
Everyone
week.
knows that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Dean shows up at the window and they have like that nice little moment where he assures her that nothing happened after the dance and they sort of are able to move past it and reconcile a little bit, which is nice.
Yeah. What did you think of Lorelai going to the diner after being uninvited to her parents' holiday party and just going to Luke and then just, venting about what was going on and Luke just making her this, I mean, I'm sorry, like he tried, but it was a really disgusting looking Santa burger. The thought was there, but
Yeah.
what do you think of like that whole interaction and what it can tell us about them and the holiday spirit of things?
I think it shows just how attached Lorelai is to Luke, that's where she decided to go. I mean, initially she did want the pizza, but when that wouldn't happen, she's like, my other comfort place is Luke's. And if I can't be with Rory right now, I'm at least going to go somewhere where I can be social and take my mind off things a little bit.
Mhm.
So it totally tracks for me that she went to see Luke. And I love how Luke sort of reads her really well and like understands why she's upset. This is the time of year you usually spend with Rory and you're fighting right now. And, you want to be with your family, but you can't be. And she's like, wow. And he says, did I mention you come here every damn day? It's a good point.
Yeah.
He knows her super well. And I think the Santa burger was disgusting, but adorable. Like, it's so Luke.
Mhm. He does make an effort and he tries, and it doesn't always come across in a way that is just, "Aw, that's so sweet." Sometimes it's like, "That's weird. I don't know what you're going for," but if you can read into it, like, he cares about Lorelai, and he recognized that she wasn't having the holiday and the evening that she wanted to have, so he was just trying to rectify that. So I appreciated what he did there.
Yeah, same. And then I love when, Taylor and the carolers come in and they want to sing for hot chocolate and he's giving them a hard time, but then he finds out about Richard being in the hospital and he's just like, everyone out, food's on me. Taylor, have your hot cocoa and then lock up. And then he just swoops Lorelai out of there and gets her to Hartford to the hospital and stays with her as long as they need him there. And it's
Mhm.
just so nice. It shows just how much he shows up for her.
Yeah. He didn't like he wasn't like starting to like love her or have feelings for her or anything in that moment or just even laying the groundwork for that. But yeah, what a great scene where she gets that phone call and she's realizing like that Richard's in the hospital. And I even love how in the car when she's telling Luke that like Rory left pretty much no information in the voicemail, nothing for her to go on, just you need to come right now. And Luke drops everything to drive her. And even when he gets to the hospital, he doesn't drop her off and just leave. He stays and he sits with them. He is at the end of the day willing to take Rory home when Lorelai asks him to. He goes above and beyond for Lorelai in a way that is just so sweet and so telling. And I love the moments during that whole interaction when Emily is starting to realize it and saying like, "What's going on with you two?"
Yeah. She reads that before Lorelai ever really properly catches on because she's just a little oblivious to it. But yeah, it's really nice. I sort of forgot something backing up a little bit to when Rory gets to the elder Gilmore's house for the Christmas party. And Emily is just extremely passive aggressive with her about the whole thing and like won't even let her apologize. And she's like, this is not the time nor the place for this discussion. Your mother should have taught you that. And I just, should we get you a crown that says passive aggressive queen? Because that's what you are.
She probably already has one in the closet. She just doesn't pull it out often enough.
Probably. Yeah. It's just, it's not Christmas or a holiday with the Gilmores until there's family drama. And, Emily's attitude throughout the whole thing is just like, you can see it going back to your point about it being a production. She's so concerned with Richard like playing with his tie and with the formality and the proper etiquette for the evening that like it doesn't even really feel like a Christmas dinner. It just feels like any other event where Emily is way too high strung.
Because they're not even acknowledging Rory a lot of the time as they're seated at the dinner table. They're more concerned about the other guests that they have there. And this is supposed to be a family holiday and an event where you focus on appreciating and acknowledging those people that are close to you in your life that you have there. And they're recognizing their guests first and foremost above Rory. And again, going back to the fact that you uninvited your own daughter. So I think you're like, it's just telling that Emily's focus here was just let me entertain, but you weren't concerned about family. This was just another party for you to plan and host.
Yeah. And that I think sort of brings us to the end of the Christmassy stuff about that episode, because the rest of it really does just focus on the mending of the relationships there. What do you think about the fact that the fight over Rory and Dean was sort of resolved with a family crisis that brought everyone back together? Do you think it's sort of tropey, or did you really like how they accomplished that?
Both, but I'm more in the camp of I like how they accomplished it. Familial incidents can happen, and I think it takes moments like that sometimes for anyone, not just Emily, Richard, Lorelai, Rory. I'm not singling out anybody here, but sometimes it takes a crisis like that for you really to have things put into perspective about what's important, what you should be holding a grudge over, and what you shouldn't be. And I think when you have that moment of Richard having his medical emergency, which, thankfully only ends up being angina, but he goes to the hospital. The family's kind of thrown into this chaos of, we don't know if he's going to live. We don't know if he's going to die. We don't know what's going on here. And it's able to have every single person within the Gilmore household, but also the relationships that Rory and Dean and Lorelai and Dean are having in that moment, and all of that chaos to kind of just be put like in sidelined almost, and just really have them recognize it's not important necessarily when there are so many bigger things that could be going on when we're potentially losing a family member. So I do like how that was kind of put into perspective for them, where it's just, let's focus on these more important things and these bonds and the love that we have for one another, and not argue or fight or be so divisive over something that's so meaningless at the end of the day, when it's so easily also resolved.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you just said. It really does put things in stark relief that, especially because Dean came and cleared things up with Lorelai and assured her that nothing happened. It's a way for Lorelai to move beyond it and remind herself that they were all just kind of being drama queens, and that they were making something out of nothing a little bit, and that there are bigger, more important things for them to worry about. And, they've really just started getting back together as a family, and started trying to build and repair those bonds. And so to let something like the slip up at the dance come between that and undo all the work that's been done to this point, it would just be a shame. And she's like reminded of the importance of this to her, seeing her father lying there in the hospital bed like that. So yeah. And then I guess there's one last little bit of Christmas right at the end, when Lorelai comes back to the diner and gives Luke the hat that he wears for the next like 6 seasons.
Yeah.
Little Christmas gift. And then they watch the tree lighting and the singers in the square. And even though it's like the rehearsal of the real deal, He's like, why are we even watching this? Like, it's the same thing every year. And she's like, because it's nice. And she's
Traditions.
right, as is tradition.
Yeah, and we'll get to the importance of traditions too.
Yeah.
Because Stars Hollow does have quite a few of them. And I think it's an important holiday thing to touch upon. But yeah, that was a really just sweet moment, and it was a really great way to end that episode.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we can go to
Now we
Bracebridge
can go to
dinner,
Bracebridge.
which is like just one of the best episodes of the entire series, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah, this one is less directly Christmassy, but it is certainly set in December, like the episode released in December, and the inn is all decorated for Christmas. There's no tree this time, but there's definitely lots of like garlands and flowers and stuff around. And Richard does reference, oh, this time of year, like not wanting to tell Emily about his retirement because like he didn't want to spoil the Christmas season. So like it's a Christmas episode, but it's not focused on Christmas.
Mm-hmm. I don't even know where to start here. Other than just to say, like, yes, I agree that this is one of my favorite episodes. I think even aside from it being the holiday season, I think the whole concept of the Bracebridge dinner and what went down there and how Lorelai was able to bring members of the community together to just be social and engaging in that way was just really heartfelt and telling. And I think it was just, I loved seeing Stars Hollow come together in that way because it's so, I don't know, just it's a good representation of what the town has with one another and how individuals can interact with one another. But I think it was good for Amy and Dan to insert that here as just, again, a way for the town to bond. But that's kind of what the holidays were about. So I really loved how they combined those two things. But going just, what do you think of the Bracebridge dinner? Like, it was a potential disaster. Like, it was an event that was falling apart. Lorelai held it together. What do you think about how Lorelai, I don't know, salvaged it? And again, just going back to how she saved the day, but also brought the town together and what that means for them in the holiday season and what that embodies.
I thought it was brilliant. I mean, like she said, it was already paid for and there were no other bookings for the inn. So might as well make some lemonade out of lemons and continue with it. They'd already purchased all the food, they'd hired all the extra help for the evening. Why not just go through with it and invite all your friends? I thought it was a stroke of genius for her to do that. I mean, typical Lorelai, that it feels very much like something she would do. And it was just so lovely. Like you said, it really brought everyone together before the holidays in friendship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And speaking of that, like, it really brings Rory and Paris together in another way too. And I love how their friendship was slow to unfold, but this is another moment where it really just is another step for them going forward within that, where Rory recognizes Paris might not necessarily have anything to do tonight. She's already driven out here to drop off stuff about the school paper. And even Lorelai is just like, why is she doing that now? And I think Rory just is kindly saying, like, well, because she probably doesn't have anything else to do. And then Paris is just like, I'm just going to probably go home and like read the Iliad or play Monopoly or something. And Rory's like, well, why don't you just stay? And Paris ends up having a really great night. I think it just is a way for them to grow their friendship. And it just involves Paris in a way where I don't think she has a lot of that in her life where she feels like she's included with things. And I really appreciated Rory taking that step to just involve her and seeing what it did for their friendship there too.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. And actually, I rewatched the episode yesterday and I had a thought that I hadn't considered before. When they have the sleigh rides, it's two to a sleigh. And I was like, did Paris ride alone? Or I wonder if she rode with Miss Patty.
Maybe.
Because Babette had Maury and I don't know, like maybe Miss Patty rode with Taylor. I don't know. But Miss Patty and Paris did sit next to each other at dinner. And so it makes me wonder if maybe like Miss Patty tried to have some, funny, over sexualized conversations with Paris at any point during this event.
Which would absolutely mortify Paris. But
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like whether she rode with Miss Patty or whether she rode by herself, I think we see Paris just really being grateful and not necessarily humbled, but also just really warmed by the fact that she was being finally included in something. Even when, like, again, Rory asks her and she's like, well, I have to make a call first. But when she goes to call her nanny to say, like, I think I'm going to be staying over and at this party, Paris is just so happy. And I love seeing that because it's just that girl needed to be included and she needed to have friends and she was finally getting that with Rory. And I don't know, I love that moment and I love to see their friendship blossoming in that way.
And I love that we get another moment like that not too long after this, and there's the rub when she comes over freaking out about getting an A- on a lab
Mhm.
or on a test, and Rory helps her study, and then she steps up and takes some of the heat off Rory and lies to Dean for her. I
Mhm.
also love that moment between them. So it's sort of like the start of that friendship for real. Like they um have a brief moment of it in season 1 where they give it a shot during the concert, but then Tristan gets in the way. And so once Tristan's out of the picture, they can really, you know, actually start to enjoy each other's friendship and not just constantly be in competition. So, yeah, you're right. That's a really nice moment for Paris.
Mhm.
What did you think about the sleigh rides? Like, is there anything about that sort of rollick through town that is particularly like heartwarming or
Yep.
enjoyable
Yep.
to you?
Yep. Sign me up. Uh
Right?
yeah. Uh I'm a horse lover in general. But it's just such whether like it's a very romantic gesture if you're taking a sleigh ride with a partner, but even if you're going with just a friend, with another person in town, and you're just getting to have a conversation with them in that way and just maybe talk to people within your community that you don't necessarily get to speak to or associate with. I thought that was a really brilliant idea on Lorelai's part. And obviously it was something that she was originally intending for the Bracebridge group, but I loved how she still kept that in play, so to say, and offered that to the community and the members of Stars Hollow that had showed up just to say, like, go take advantage of this. Uh the atmosphere was beautiful. It was snowing. It was gorgeous. I would love to take a ride through town like that and just again, it doesn't matter who you're going with, but that's just an experience. So I love seeing it play out in that way.
Yeah. Again, something I noticed on this latest rewatch. Actually, I may have noticed this before, but the Warner's backlot is so small that they clearly had to do several loops around just like that one
Yeah.
main drag because you see them pass Luke's multiple times. And I also
Mhm.
noticed that when Jess hops into Rory's sleigh as if they're sort of like just leaving the inn, they're actually by Miss Patty's and they pass
Mhm.
Luke's immediately. So like their positioning where they start is like not actually at the inn.
Yeah. Uh
so
Rule number 2, cardio. That's just another nerd
yeah.
reference. I don't know who's going to get that, but
Rule number 1 is double tap. So
mhm.
if that gives you any further clues, that's what that was. Yeah. Yeah,
That's
I love how we
wonderful.
get those 3 very different sleigh rides. So you get Lorelai and Luke having a conversation about Jess and parenting, and you get that sort of like that sad story about Jess from Luke's perspective. And then we get Emily and Richard in the middle, and you finally see them having fun and having a light conversation and being very flirtatious and happy. So that's lovely, obviously, before the shoe drops. Um,
Mhm. Mm.
and then we have Jess and Rory, which is really interesting because it's kind of one of the first times you see a spark between them,
Yep.
and you start to see Rory's questioning her relationship with Dean a little bit, and then you also get some uncharacteristic vulnerability from Jess, where he admits that
Mhm.
his mom didn't want him to come home for the holiday, and it's heartbreaking. And he's like, "Yeah, Luke lied to me about it. He tried to make me think that he wanted me to stay here, but I know that's not the case." So, yeah, that's a great moment where normally someone like Jess wouldn't tell anyone that. They would just sort of hold on to that, but it shows how much he trusts Rory and how much he wants to connect to her.
Mm-hmm. So going on that point, like, how do you think we see Bracebridge end, and the following day, Dean and Clara are going home. Jess is going to go back, like, and they have, like, Dean and Rory have a kiss, and Claire's like, no, don't kiss, but they end up doing it anyway. Do you think at that point that Rory was having significant doubts about her relationship? I mean, this is, again, not like, this is something that we'll touch more on with relationships and character studies, but do you think the holiday atmosphere specifically was like forcing her to reevaluate and re-question her relationship with Dean?
I don't know if this was her having significant doubts. I think this was the first earworm where she's only starting to consider, like, oh, are we actually compatible? Or is this just, you know, him being the first boy who showed interest in me? And like,
Mm-hmm.
have we maintained that level of connectivity? Is there more out there for me? And, so you can see the look on her face when she catches Jess's eye from across the room. And that's when you start to see the crack in the facade for them. So, yeah, it's a really great moment in their burgeoning relationship as well. And you see Dean's jealousy has shifted from Tristan, now that he's out of the picture, over to Jess, who is the new competitor in town, if you will. He's picking up the vibes that they're putting down and is not liking what he's seeing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very interesting time for them to drop this. They stick Jess and Rory together in this romantic scenario and have them have this bonding moment. So it's a good one. It's juicy.
Yeah. I don't want to leave us off on this episode without talking about the snowman,
Oh, that's true. We still have the Bjork
the Bjork
snowman.
and the snowman
Yeah.
competition, which
And I
I
love
think
how
is just honorable mention. So,
totally. And I love how they end the episode off on Bjork's human behavior. And there's sort of like a bell, like a tinkling bell sound sort of layered over it from the horses' bells. So it's like
mm-hmm.
a Christmas version of human behavior, which is like, if you read the lyrics of that song, it's so very much appropriate for this episode. And it's just such an interesting ending. And it brings me to the point that, in the season 1 Christmas episode, there's actually Christmas music. Actually, I forgot to mention that. I noticed it's really quiet, but when Lorelai and Rory are having their sort of like their moment where Lorelai tells Rory that Dean came by and they had a talk, and she said that he has sort of like satisfied her worries that something happened and that she knows that nothing did. The song that's playing in the background very quietly is War Is Over,
Mm-hmm.
which is super appropriate. But
Good
yeah,
tell.
so yeah, no explicit Christmas music in it. But I'm not quite done with this episode yet either, because there's one last big thing that we haven't touched on, which is Christopher inviting Rory for Christmas
Yes.
to spend it with
Yes.
him and his new girlfriend, Sherry. What's your take
Mm-hmm.
on that? Like, was Chris right to call Lorelai and ask her permission in advance, or was he putting her in a really awkward position by like putting it in her hands and asking for permission?
No, I'm gonna be in the Chris camp here. I think he was right to call Lorelai. Rory is technically still a minor. Lorelai is her direct, you know, like, she's a single parent. She's the caretaker there. She has rights over Rory's well-being and parental supervision in that way. So I think Chris was absolutely in the right here to call Lorelai first and say, is it okay if, we have Rory come stay with me for a couple days, especially when you have a new girlfriend in the picture. Lorelai has not had any or any interaction with Sherry at this point. This is someone that they both don't know. And when you're dealing with a child here, and again, someone who is still a minor, you have to be cognizant of the company that they're going to keep and who they're going to be interacting with. Lorelai doesn't know Sherry. I'm sure well, she's an okay person. But from a parental standpoint, Chris was absolutely in the right here to call Lorelai first and ask permission here, I would have taken more issue with it had he called Rory and gone behind Lorelai's back and just been like, no, come stay with me for a few days. I'm sure your mother will be fine with it. So I think he did the right thing there. I don't love that Lorelai didn't immediately go to Rory and say, hey, your father has, wanted you to come stay for a couple days. I think Lorelai should have been more upfront about that, because at the end of the day, that's still your father. You're still a parent there. So there should have been more communication and transparency. But short answer, yes, Chris did the right thing there. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I didn't even think about it in terms of like, Rory's security and the fact that Lorelai kind of needs to know where she is and who she's interacting with at any given time. I more thought of it like, you know, leaving Lorelai alone on Christmas, knowing that like Rory is the one she spends it with and that Rory is her best friend. It does kind of put her in an awkward position to try to invite Rory for a holiday that would normally be spent with her mother instead of him. But I also appreciate him wanting to share the season with his new little family unit with Sherry and Rory. So I can see kind of both sides of that. But yeah. What do you think of the fact that like that Lorelai was clearly super jealous and that's why she didn't tell Rory? And then Rory suggests, we'll have to split holidays. Like I'll be with you on Labor Day and her on Memorial Day. And, I'll have to find out about her religion and, maybe you can take dibs on Hanukkah.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, but your question just leads right into it. Lorelai was just being, I think, like, I understand she loves Rory and that's your daughter and that's been your, worldview for the past 16 years that you've been raising her, but there's also a little bit of possessiveness there. Like at the end of the day, you are her mother. She still has a father. You're not her only parent or adult figure in her life. And Christopher still has rights there. And he deserves and should be spending time with his daughter. And if he's making the effort to do so, I think it's wrong for Lorelai to be so dismissive of it. So I don't love how she, again, didn't immediately tell Rory. It just, to me, speaks that she's just insecure, that she's not able or willing to spend the holiday alone because she has this almost unhealthy attachment and bond with her daughter. And that's its own conversation. But she should have been more upfront with Rory, as if to say, like, your father would like to spend the holidays with you. I think this could probably be a good thing for you. And let's talk about it and see if you feel comfortable going.
Mm-hmm. Tune in next week for more on Lorelai and Rory's relationship. But yeah, I agree with all that. The hard part though is like, no one likes spending Christmas alone. And because she doesn't have a great relationship with her parents and she doesn't have a significant other, she really would be alone for the holiday if Rory were to leave, whereas Christopher wouldn't. And so I can understand her sort of jealously guarding her traditions with her daughter, but it also would have been good for Rory to have that bonding time with her dad and Sherry. But Lorelai clearly still holds a flame for Chris and is not happy that he's dating someone else and that he's getting stuff together without her. And so it's a very complex, like layered emotion for her. So not only would she face a holiday alone, but she has to face that like she's not the one with Chris.
Yeah. And it could also just lead her to having to, I don't think she would, but like, do you want to associate with Emily and Richard on the holiday, or do you really just want to be by yourself? Like, that's not something that Lorelai has known. And I don't think she does well being alone. So, but you can't put that on your daughter. You need to be sometimes okay with your, I don't want to say like okay with your loneliness, but you can't cling to your daughter as your only means of like attachment in that way. That's just unhealthy. You need to allow her to have experiences with other family members and with other people. She does the same thing kind of with Emily and Richard, where she's always held her back from getting to know her grandparents because she's always wanted Rory's worldview to just be her. And you need to like let her go beyond that and let her experience life.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's it for Bracebridge dinner for the most part. So
go ahead.
I was just gonna say that brings us into season 3, which doesn't actually have a Christmas episode, but we do get That'll Do Pig with the Winter Carnival, and we have Paris's rundown of her Christmas spent with Jamie for the first time. She has a boyfriend at Christmas, and it's just such a lovely story.
What did you think about it? Especially because like it's not all about Christmas there. It's just about like the holiday spirit in general. But how did you just see that? Like, what did you think about how that played out and Paris finally not necessarily being alone for the first time and letting other people into her circle in that way?
I love it because clearly she doesn't have, like I said earlier, a very tight bond with her family. And, she says that one year she asked her mom to get a Hanukkah bush, and her mom made her watch Shoah a bunch of times.
Oh.
So, it's so cute watching a Jewish girl experience Christmas for the first time and having this sort of like sense of wonder because Hanukkah is a very different type of holiday from Christmas. It has a lot more tradition and history and meaning behind it, whereas Christmas, to most people who aren't deeply, deeply religious, has more become about the presents and the traditions and the tree and the decorations and all that kind of stuff. So to go from this sort of like stark religious holiday to a 12-foot Christmas tree and a mound of presents and eggnog. Can you imagine having eggnog for the first time like this? And it's like, I'm
Pass.
Jewish and I'm having eggnog. Yeah, pass.
Pass in general.
Yeah. But I actually found one that, like, at least for some period of time, I was like, I actually like this. It was a coconut-based eggnog, so it was vegan. And I was like, hey, this actually isn't so bad because it has no egg in it. So it's not like nearly as gross. It's more just like a really thick milk that's been spiced. So that wasn't so bad. But I bought it again last year and didn't like it as much as I remember liking it the year before. And so it's funny how that works, how you like convince yourself that you like this really gross drink just because it's Christmas and you want to get in the spirit. It's funny how that works.
Yeah, no, I'm still going to have a hard pass on eggnog. I'm sorry. Like, if you love it, you love it. No, it's disgusting. I don't choose to drink that.
I'll take my rum and I'll take my rum in any other form but eggnog.
Yeah, or like cider or something. Just anything, not that.
Exactly.
But yeah, we don't get a lot from that particular episode, which is That'll Do Pig. But I do love what it allowed us to see with just Paris getting into the holiday spirit, finally having someone to spend time with. So even when we have episodes like that aren't solely based on Christmas or like a holiday perspective, it's just nice to see those little nuggets thrown in there for character development.
Yeah. And I also love that anecdote that she had a debate with like Jamie's grandfather, like this theological discussion. Jesus, Messiah or nice Jewish kid with a hammer.
And Paris would.
Yeah.
That's
and
so
then
her.
I know. And she says she gets invited back for Easter and she's like, you think I would skip on a chance to like debate Christ rising from the dead? I am so there.
I would just love to be on a fly on the wall for those conversations, but that's
she probably like Jamie's a smart guy, and so I'm assuming a lot of his other family members are smart, but Paris is still going to eviscerate them.
Yeah. By nature, if not just by intellect. So
yeah.
But yeah, I don't get a lot with that one, so I think we can move on to the next Christmas. I guess not full episode, but the next time we notice holiday anything being brought up.
Yeah, there's a few like mentions of it. For example, in Face Off, when Emily has her outburst about Gran kissing a guy in a jogging suit in the living room, and Lorelai's sort of powwowing with Richard about it after the fact, she's like, it didn't happen at Christmas, but it sounds like something that would happen at Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a funny one. But just like a super brief mention. And that episode obviously happens in like, I don't know, February or March because it's several weeks after That'll Do Pig, which happens in January. And then there is one mention from Luke about Lorelai having a daughter who looks like she belongs on top of a Christmas tree.
Yeah,
another reference to Rory as the town angel.
Yeah. I get what he's saying, that from like a character perspective, she's just really top tier within Stars Hollow, but don't put her on the pedestal in that way. You're not doing anything, like you're not doing that girl any favors in terms of just inflating the ego. So Maybe scale that back a little bit.
Yeah, apparently the pedestal is the top of the Christmas tree.
Who would have thought?
It's the top of the 12-foot Christmas tree. There you go. That's the answer.
We figured it out.
Yeah. I don't know. I find it interesting too how the show skips December. Like 4 out of 7 seasons. So in season 1, we have Forgiveness and Stuff dropping in December. We have Bracebridge Dinner dropping in December. Then That'll Do Pig happens in January because everyone's back at school. So it's clearly well into the new year. In the Clamor and the Clangor in season 4 would be around Christmas. Like that would be the closest to Christmas. But that episode also dropped in January. Women of Questionable Morals from season 5 is also in January. Rory's back at school. Season 6 jumps right from Thanksgiving to Rory going back to Yale. And so that brings us to season 7, which has that sort of like back-to-back pair of episodes. We have Merry Fisticuffs, which dropped December 5th, 2006. And then we have Santa's Secret Stuff, which actually dropped January 23rd, 2007. So there's like always this really long gap between the end of November and into January. And I'm like, they just completely brush right over the holiday season half the time, not only in content, but in like their actual release dates in real life. So
yeah,
it's interesting how that happens. But so Merry Fisticuffs isn't, like, despite the name, isn't even really a Christmas episode unto itself. It's not super overt about Christmas. But you can tell that it's leading up to the holiday because Stars Hollow is all decked out. And I guess that brings us to that scene right near the end.
Yep.
Where Luke and Christopher duke it out in the town square.
Yeah. I don't condone violence or physicality or just like, that sort of encounter with one another, but it kind of, and I think you'll appreciate why I'm saying this too, it really reminded me of like a professional hockey fight where you just see one player going after another player on the other team, and as much as like you may not condone that and you're just like, let's just all scale back, like I've been to hockey games, you've been to hockey games, and there's a certain point where you're just like, yeah, hit him, knock his teeth out, like punch him in the face, just you kind of get into it in a way where it's kind of just the spirit of what you're seeing. And that's not exactly what's going on here, but there's been so much build up with like this relationship triangle where it was filmed so brilliantly when you see Chris leaving the restaurant and then Luke getting out of his truck and you see them both looking at each other, just like knowing like, all right, this is about to go down. I'm not going to lie. There's a part of me that was just like, I'll say I was probably a little more team Luke in that moment, but it's just like, yeah, like just deck him. Cause I think at this point, like maybe he not deserves it, but it's just, you're kind of into it in that way. Paralleling again, the hockey fight metaphor.
Yeah. I like that. I appreciate the hockey reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can tell that both men have stuff going on in their lives that are making them emotionally invested. And so Chris is having issues with Lorelai and sensing a lack of commitment from her. And so running into Luke and Dula was only like the tip of the iceberg. But then Lorelai doesn't, seem to like the idea of wanting to have another kid with Chris right away. And she had poo-pooed the idea of moving to that house that Chris wanted. And, or was that the next episode? I can't remember. But
no, it was that one.
Okay. Yeah. And then Lorelai doesn't want to say vows at the wedding reception party. So he's definitely sensing something is off with Lorelai, and it goes deeper than just Luke. But Luke happens to be the outlet to which he can direct that energy. And on the other hand, Luke is fighting with Anna, and he's frustrated at the idea of potentially losing April. Even though he's only just met her, he's really gotten attached, and he really wants that chance to be a dad. And Anna is just stonewalling him at every turn. So both have these other things going on. And yeah, you're right. It's one of those things where it was so built up, and you could just tell that it had to come to some sort of head like this. in the same way that Dean and Jess came to a head in Keg Max,
Yep.
where they finally had that blowout at the party. So, you know, we get those two main fights, and it's something that you can kind of sense, but you were never really sure if you were going to get them just because of the way the show is and the way it's structured and how they like to sort of subvert those expectations, I guess. But we ended up getting it. We got the blowout fight, and it was so absurd because it's in this like holiday village feeling where everything's lit up and there's, you know, like gingerbread houses essentially and the Christmas tree, and they knock the tree over, and then "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" starts playing, this like light, tinkly, pretty version
Yeah.
of it. And it's just so, like I said, absurd. It is absurdist comedy in that moment, but there's so much emotion behind it. And so I think it was brilliantly done, where it felt real and it felt raw and it felt like two dudes who kind of like knew what they were doing and just had to get this aggression out. But then they just sort of like look at each other and walk in the separate directions. Like, okay, we've had our fun being a
Fun.
not quite the right term, but you know what I mean. Like, okay, we did it. We got that out. Let's just call it here, because, you know, it's not going to do either of us any good to knock each other's lights out, basically.
Yeah, I love how, I say I love, but like I appreciate how that fight ended with them kind of just glancing at each other as if to say, like, are we good here? Did we get enough out that we needed to get out? And I think they both just innately realized, like, yeah, for the moment, at least we probably did. And they're able to go their own separate ways. Again, the whole fight itself was not a healthy thing, but I think that was just good for them to realize, like, we're done at least for now in this moment, and we just need to like end this fight and call it off here.
Yeah, obviously the things between them are not resolved, and we see that play out over the next few episodes. But like you said, it's like for now, we're square, we're good here.
Yeah,
stay the hell away from me, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that leads us into the last of the main series Christmas episodes, which is Santa's Secret Stuff. And so Lorelai has been holding off on Christmas until Rory returns from visiting Logan in London. And, you know, we get really the first true look into the Gilmore Christmas traditions. We get like a smidge of it in season 1 with the Christmas party and the apple tarts. And you see them decorate the house. Well, they weren't actually decorating the house, but the house was decorated. Whereas this time you see the boxes of Christmas stuff, and they actually go into the details about explaining what they do each year to Christopher, who, despite being Rory's father and one of Lorelai's oldest friends, is still like a newbie and a foreigner in this house and needs to be shown the ways.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, and we'll talk about this a little bit, like Gigi as a fourth person there also plays a part, because I feel like it would have been very different if it was just Lorelai and Rory and Christopher, and they're trying to establish a new Christmas routine and or insert traditions. But I think there's also a lot to be said when you have a child in the picture and you're needing to be cognizant and aware of like the holiday and Christmas experience that you're giving her, especially when you're instilling a belief in Santa Claus and having that come into the picture. So wanting her to like just have like a really special and, you know, childlike holiday experience. So I think that plays into it. But I love what Chris was trying to do. Just get back together with these two women who have always been a very important part of his life, bring Gigi into the picture. I appreciate what he was trying to do there. And Lorelai and Rory were not always super receptive to it. But I love the effort that he was making to try and instill some of those new traditions.
Yeah. I think he was right to say, okay, you've had your things, but now, you know, this family dynamic has changed, and we should, like, I don't want to come in and replace everything that you do, but I want to feel like a part of it, and I want us to have something that's ours, not just yours. So, yeah, I love that he comes in with these, like, really gaudy stockings, and they're like, yeah, we hang our stockings on the banister because there was a fire incident and they almost burned to bits. So now we put them on nails on the banister. And he comes in with these like new stockings and they're all embroidered and they pull out those like old school red felt ones with the glitter name. And they're like, these are still perfectly fine, right? They're all like blackened from the fire incident.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I love that because it's after Christmas, all the Christmas trees are discounted. And so they get 7 of them.
7.
Like buck a tree.
Yeah, because we need one for the kitchen, one for the living room, one for this room, one for the other room.
But I don't blame them.
Yeah,
I would do the same thing.
If they're discounted, why not?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. But I love how even like they'll even have like a moment later on in Weston's where they're just like, you know, eating and ordering desserts and they're just like, you know, Christmas is over, right? And Lorelai's just like, nope. Like,
yeah. Christmas spirit doesn't just disappear on the 26th.
Die. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, do you have any of that candy cane coffee like somewhere? Like if it just disappears. I don't blame her. Like peppermint mocha is my favorite holiday drink. I don't blame her for looking forward to it all year and then because she's waiting for Rory, she doesn't have it, and then she misses out on it entirely. Like, I'd feel pretty bad if I missed out on Starbucks peppermint mocha all season.
Yeah.
So, I get that. Yeah. But, yeah. I love that they sort of pull out all the Christmas decorations and they explain how the mistletoe goes on the ceiling fan blades because then it makes kissing more like a sport.
It's an interesting take. Don't hurt yourself.
Yeah. Ooh, the one I could definitely see myself getting on board with is putting the red and green M&Ms in the cereal. Sign me up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Gonna try that sometime, I think.
Never done it, but yeah, that sounds interesting. I just want to ask real quick, like, how do you feel about like Gigi's presence in that particular episode? They really involved her a lot here. And I think this is like pretty much the most that we ever see of her as Rory's half sister. But I loved how they inserted her so much into a Christmas episode and how that really changes how Lorelai and Rory approach this holiday with having to factor in that there's a child here that is, you know, you need to be mindful of giving them like a really wonderful Christmas experience too. Like, how do you think that factored in? And what did you think about having that character being so prevalent here?
That's a great question. And I think it brought out the child in both of them. It sort of allowed them, you know, I think as characters, they would probably definitely get into that holiday spirit themselves. But having a kid around is just like a whole other level of Christmas magic and like trying to include her in their, you know, they're making up the garlands with the popcorn and the cranberries and telling her that Lorelai knows Santa and she has his clothes because she used to be his dry cleaner.
Yes. Yeah. Such a good line. And she believes it. She's just like, oh, wow.
Yeah. I love how she tells Christopher later, she's like, Lorelai knows Santa's dry cleaning. And then Chris comes in and says, well, Lorelai is a remarkable woman.
Yeah.
So it's so cute. Yeah. And I think now that you mention it, I think this is like the last episode that we get any Gigi because this is where Lorelai and Chris sort of fall apart. And it's an interesting way to leave off her character. But you're right. It's also the most we get of her. We have like a smidge in French Twist, but then they sort of drop her off with Sherry and she's not seen again until this episode. So yeah. And it is one of the first times that a kid has seemingly been so integral to a storyline and to these characters. So, you know, all the other ones are off on the side. Like we don't get a lot of Suki's kids or Lane's kids or any of that going on. So having Gigi around really injects a different kind of energy, especially on a holiday that's as magical and childlike, I suppose, as Christmas can be for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I understand why we didn't get more of Gigi. But even if she had been alluded to a little bit more, I would have appreciated it because she is Rory's half sister at the end of the day. That's not nothing. So I love what we got from her here. Even if she had been talked about more going forward, that would have been nice. But it was at least it was nice seeing her here in this holiday atmosphere and how Lorelai and Rory had to kind of adjust their holiday expectations and their own traditions and what they ended up doing to factor in a child. And that was just really touching and heartwarming to me.
Yeah. And it's interesting because they have a hard time integrating anyone into anything they do.
Mm-hmm.
But Gigi is just so innocent and sweet that it becomes kind of natural for them to do it. So, yeah, it's really cute what they do.
Yeah. Well,
Ooh,
I
and
think that's... Go ahead.
I guess that brings us to the Westons scene where, you know, Lorelai is expressing the fact that she's having issues writing this character reference for Luke,
Mm-hmm.
and she wants to go Christmas shopping. Rory eventually agrees, and they go to the mall and they run into Luke and April,
Mm-hmm.
and you know they start talking about how Luke used to get so many presents for Rory and how he got her monogram towels and you know stuff with unicorns on it, and you can just see the look on Lorelai's face of like, God, this guy was so good to my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how she ultimately finds the words to express why Luke should be able to remain in April's life. And it's just such a lovely scene. I think they killed it with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Holidays can sometimes be really divisive and pull people apart, but sometimes they can really bring people together. And I think that's what that scene did. Um, it just established a more bond, like it allowed for Luke and April to have a more close bond with one another, where he actually got her a gift that she would appreciate. They didn't expect to encounter or to run into Lorelai and Rory there, but when they did, yeah, that was a beautiful scene of just when I thought that Rory liked unicorns for the next 5 years. I got her unicorn stuff, and turns out she didn't like it, but he was listening and he was acknowledging and understanding what Rory liked as a child. And I don't even think it wasn't necessarily, I mean, he cared for Rory, but it was more about Lorelai as an important person in my life. And he was already having those feelings for her develop. So he was a good listener, and he was understanding what Rory liked, what she was going to appreciate as a gift. And it was such a great acting moment, I think, for Lauren Graham, because she doesn't speak really the whole scene, but just having the close-ups and the prolonged shots on her face where you can just see she's recognizing what a wonderful man Luke has been, not only to her, but to her daughter. And this is why, yes, like you said, he does deserve to have April in his life. Um, it was a well-written scene, but again, just Lauren Graham's acting. Sometimes you can say a lot without saying anything at all, and she really nailed it there in that regard.
Yeah. And then I love the end of the episode where you see her wrapping up on the typewriter and she folds up the letter, she puts it in an envelope, and she goes outside to mail it. And that's the exact moment it starts snowing, which is super meaningful in Lorelai's life. Everything great happens to her when it snows. So I thought that was such a delightfully subtle ad just to show how sort of fated and destined Luke and Lorelai are.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
it's not a Christmas episode, but I do love To Whom It May Concern that comes next. And yeah, I love watching that sort of like arbitration between them. That
stop
court stuff
stealing
is
my
wonderful.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Because I was about to say, like, we're not going to talk about it here, but we will at some point. But like the moment when that letter gets read out loud, and it's not read out loud by Lorelai, but when that letter is verbalized and we hear it actually being spoken and we hear what Lorelai wrote, I think it's at least top 3, if not the most, like the number one moment throughout the entire show for me that just always gets me. And I will just always watch that scene and just be like, oh my goodness, like hearing what it was her going to bat for Luke to keep April in his life, but it was a love letter. And it just, that's a top tier scene for me throughout the entire series, of something where I will just always watch that and just like, yeah, just what it emotionally does for pulling at your heartstrings for wanting to see these two people get together. It was a beautiful and just lovely letter.
Yeah, we'll have to talk more about that at a future date because
Yeah.
Chris picks up on that and it starts a whole thing between them. But that's not a conversation for right now.
Yeah.
We need to move back to Christmas. Yeah. So, well, that brings us to the end of the main series. But I found it interesting that the revival opens up on a panning shot of Stars Hollow all decked out for Christmas, even though it's like January, because you can see a banner in the background that says "Welcome to 2016." Everything is still all decked out. We've never seen the town quite this done up for Christmas that I can remember. And, you know, the lights are all still up. The gazebo is decked out. There are 4 huge nutcrackers flanking the gazebo, which I've never seen before. There was a family of penguins on the Stars Hollow sign.
Yes, there were.
Like, look at the base of the Stars Hollow sign. And it's just like the cutest thing. And so then I love the conversation as well that Lorelai and Rory have as they're sort of walking through town and she's catching her up on stuff. And they're like, oh, Al's Pancake World won best Christmas decorations again. Well, it's that eggplant Jesus in the Nativity. Like, you can't beat it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think eggplant Jesus is? Any thoughts on eggplant Jesus?
I don't want to speculate because my mind just goes places it probably shouldn't.
That's fair. I mean, I think we've been conditioned by emojis. Yeah.
Yeah, don't ask me to answer that question.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know what they were getting at with that. Yeah. And then I love how Lorelai says that like the town is basically a giant snow globe. She's right. It's so cozy. And,
I was about to, she's not wrong.
Idyllic. She's not wrong.
She's not wrong. Yeah, I mean,
and then, I
even picture like what a snow globe would look like, and just when you buy one, and I could totally see like the Stars Hollow sign, like just being inserted into a snow globe, and it's just like that's just tracks for feels and for a vibe. So,
yeah, I need it. I think they exist, and I'm gonna need one. But the other thing that really like strikes me about the town as well is Taylor's on this campaign to get sewers installed. And there's this sign that says, all I want for Christmas are my 2 front teeth and sewers for Stars Hollow.
Sewers for Stars Hollow.
I'm like, oh my God, it's so Taylor to do that. My goodness.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you're going to get though. Like middle of Connecticut, old school New England town, still running on an outdated septic system. So, but I love that he uses the holidays for like this, not even like a political campaign, but just this campaign to just progress the town and move them forward. It's like you could do that any time of year, and maybe it's just coincidental that you're doing it now at the holidays, but I love that in the backdrop of it being the holiday season and we're celebrating Christmas, or again whatever you want to celebrate, that the town is just riveted with like picket signs everywhere of just like, let's bring in the sewer system. And you actually see him going from business to business, just campaigning for it. And even going to Luke and just be like, can you sign my petition? Like, just, it's so good. It's just such great comedy.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Taylor would be the type to hijack Christmas for his own ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then we have Rory grabbing her Stars Hollow Gazette, and you know, it's the Christmas edition, and she says, manger news, Santa's wishes, eggnog checkpoints. Love that. But like, again, don't love eggnog, but I love that Stars Hollow has eggnog checkpoints. Yeah. And then the Christmas poems, like they have the seasonal poem each time they do an issue, and you know, everyone loves the Christmas poem. So it's just kind of it's a funny callback to the Gazette, and also foreshadowing for Rory working there and becoming the new editor. And I love that she wants to, as someone who's so into the tradition of the paper, she comes in and she changes the poem. I don't know. Yeah. Weird.
But. Yep. But like, how, like, I love how Taylor's just like, you can't do that. Like, and the whole time, like, how dare you? Like, that's tradition.
Yeah.
And yeah, uh, traditions are a very important part of Stars Hollow.
Mhm.
They're an important part of any holiday, really. But I love how important they are to Stars Hollow. We see so many of these just town traditions play out throughout all 7 seasons, whether it's, the Christmas time of year or otherwise. But I can understand where Taylor's just like, you can't do that, and Rory's just like, I can though, so watch me.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm the editor now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then one of my favorite parts of the entire revival is 10-15 minutes in, when we're moving from the Stars Hollow town center back to Lorelai's house. Um, and we see Grantley Phillips back for the first time, and he's playing
Oh,
Winter Glow. Like, I get shivers every time I see it sort of like pan around to him, and he's playing this amazing song. And then you see the Gilmore house again for the first time, and it's all lit up and done for Christmas, and there's, 2 wreaths on the doors, and it's just, they really nailed the first portion of the revival. It has some weaker points as it continues on,
yeah.
but they started out so strong with Stars Hollow at Christmas, or just after Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just really hitting those nostalgia points so well, so early. But yeah, I love that. Um, the inn is all done up for Christmas. Oh, and like, speaking of Judaism, I also noticed that in town, like when they're panning over to Grant, there's like a garland that's strung up between the streetlights, and
Mm-hmm.
on one portion there's a snowflake, and then there's also a Star of David. So,
Oh, yeah.
they are acknowledging that Stars Hollow is, somewhat more religiously diverse, and obviously we have the whole um, sharing of the church space storyline kind of earlier in the series, and so we know
Yeah.
that there is a market um,
Yeah.
for Hanukkah in Stars Hollow. Maybe not as large as for the Christmas stuff, but it's there. And it's a nice nod for Amy and Dan to insert it in
Mm-hmm.
there now that they're back and they're doing Christmas again. Um, so, yeah. I
Yeah.
forgot how Christmas heavy the first few minutes of the revival were until I rewatched it recently. And it's just such a nice way to bring us back to Stars Hollow.
Yeah. Again, I think it's just geographical. Like, they lived in an area where that was probably the predominant religion and or holiday that's being observed. But just for the sake of inclusion, and especially with Amy and Dan being Jewish, I loved how they were to even just minutely and subtly from time to time incorporate their own religious symbols, because it's just important. Like, we're all going to be celebrating and acknowledging different things this time of year. And yeah, just I love it, because there needs to be that inclusion, and everyone needs to be able to see on screen what the holidays mean to them. So I just love that they were able to include that, especially as, this is their baby, this is their creation. So factor it in.
Yeah. Something has occurred to me that I missed from Bracebridge dinner, which is the Christmas cards and the ugly babies.
Oh, the ugly babies
And then Lorelai hides the one of the ugly baby
in
in the
the
bed
bed.
at the
Yeah.
end. Oh, it's so funny. Yeah,
And
that felt like
I love how Rory's just like, you put the ugly baby card in my bed, like, and at first I think she thinks it's like a boy, and then Lorelai's like, no, it's a girl, and she's like, wait, really?
yeah, they're so judgmental about the ugly baby Silla cards. I'm like, this feels mean. But then again,
Yeah.
it's not the only time that they're mean to people throughout the series, so it tracks. But yeah. Oh, and then something else I was thinking about is the noticeable lack of other holidays. So obviously
Mm-hmm.
we have all the Thanksgiving episodes, and then we have the Easter egg hunt, where Kirk hides all the eggs in the square, and like, what, 58 or 59 of them. do not get retrieved and end up decomposing in the square and making the entire town square stink. Yeah. Love that episode. But like we don't get New Year's, we don't get anything else really. And I find it interesting that there's such a lack of focus on holidays where a lot of other shows really lean on holidays for plot points and for big episodes kind of thing, for big things to happen. And Gilmore just almost completely avoids them. But
I mean, do you think there's a reason for that?
I don't know. Maybe Amy and Dan just don't care for holidays the way some people do. Like, it could just be a personal preference on their part. Because, you know, New Year's is a secular holiday, and there are other types of holidays besides religious ones. And so it makes sense that they would skip the Christian holidays if they're not particularly into that. But why skip New Year's? New Year's feels like a fun concept to explore with these characters, so I don't know why they didn't do it. Although there is one New Year's reference that sticks out to me where Lorelai says to Rory, I have a New Year's resolution for you. Be more cynical and self-involved.
Yeah. As if Rory needs to be told to do that, because, oh gosh, like, I love her. She's one of our main characters, but Rory is already too self-centered for her own good. You don't need to be encouraging her to be any more self-absorbed.
Yeah. It's like, for once, someone kept the resolution.
Yeah.
It's not what you want, but it's what happened. So, yeah. I think that's all I have on holidays in the show that are not Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we'll touch upon, you know, Thanksgiving when we get around to it next year this time, because, I mean, we only have 3 years or so of content planned out. So stay tuned. We will get there. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap us up for this one, unless you really have anything else that you want to say.
No, I think I covered a lot more than I thought I was going to discover about Christmas on the show, because I always sort of thought that, like, there were hardly any Christmas moments, but some of the episodes really did have a lot to dig into emotionally for these characters. So I think it was a fun exploration for us to sort of look at these characters through the lens of a holiday and what that does to people and how people react to tradition and what it says about character moments.
Yeah, I agree. That's what we're here for. And it's also fun, like, to just explore these things where, like, you know, as an audience, we hope that you're appreciating everything that you're hearing in terms of content, but we also find out things and discover new things on our own, even as we're having these conversations, as we're preparing, and as we're even filming these episodes. So that's always really fun to discover too. And I'm just grateful for every new thing that we discover about the show. So yeah. Right on.
We've seen these episodes so many times, and yet we're just still coming up with new things all the time. And it blows my mind how nuanced the show gets, and I love it. So we're here to celebrate that. You know, it's a little more laid back episode for you. I had a lot of fun doing this one. Obviously, I got in the spirit myself, and you know, yeah. So we're coming up on Christmas. Season. Yeah, we're personally coming up on Christmas as we record this, and we're in Hanukkah season as well. So, and I'm sure there are other holidays that are coming up. You know, Kwanzaa and other celebrations, festivals, all kinds of stuff is coming soon. So all the best to you and yours. Happy holidays.
Yep. That being said, what have we got coming up next? What are we planning on talking about next week for the viewers?
Next week, we're going to dig a little more into Lorelai and Rory's relationship. So kind of how they have a unique dynamic as mother and daughter, and just sort of really go deep on that relationship.
Yep. That's going to be a good episode. We hope that you'll come join us for that and keep watching us and checking us out. But in the meantime, if you're starved for Gilmore Girls content, please always feel free to go back and watch any of the episodes we've already done in the past. We've done already deep dives on Max Medina, pressures on gifted students, generational traumas, all of that fun stuff. So please go back and watch those. As always, we would appreciate your support if you can just subscribe to our channel, like this video. And if you want to check us out on social media, you can do so. All of the links to our social media accounts are in the description below. But that being said, we also just want to take this time from Kate and myself to just wish you a very happy holiday season. No matter how you're celebrating, no matter how you're enjoying this time of year, we just wish you the best to you and yours. And we just hope that it's a lovely and enjoyable and fun and relaxing type of time of year for you. And we just wish you all the best. But that being said, take care. Have a great holiday season. And we will see you next Friday night for dinner.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Bye.